Good evening. It's my pleasure to call to order the Policy Committee meeting of the School District of Haverford School District on Thursday, April 25th, 2024. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sure. Happy to take the mic from here. We have several policies on our agenda tonight, and I think we'll just go through them in the order that they're listed. So the first one that we're going to take a look at is Policy 712, Environmental Sustainability, and there's a proposed administrative regulation with 712. This would be a new policy for the district, but I believe that we have looked at one before, a draft at the last policy committee meeting. So there were several changes here, and I'll say a little bit about it. Yeah, I was just going to say, I'll ask for the district or the solicitor to explain the revisions.
Sure. People may recall, this was the policy, Thank you. This was a policy that we took a look at last time that we met, and given the discussion around the table, we formed a subcommittee of the board. So we had Dr. McKay, Mr. Schwartz, Dr. Shelton, administrators from the business office, facilities, and transportation look at the policy and the administrative regulations. So what you see in the draft policy highlighted in green are the changes that were made as a result. That subcommittee met twice as a result of those meetings, and same for the administrative regulations. There weren't as many revisions to the policy itself, looking at, stressing in there the importance of environmental sustainability and the value to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that the board would recognize that operations impact the environment of the local community and beyond. And then we added some language in that we would seek to reduce the adverse environmental impact and to promote the model environmental sustainability. So we added those pieces in there as well. We didn't have a completed section on the delegation of responsibility, so we added that in, and then we added, the word vehicles was added on number 5 under general guidelines, assess the use of renewable energy measures on new or modified buildings and vehicles as applicable. We decided to remove providing the yearly update to the board as a component of the budget presentation. We kept in there providing the yearly update, but we felt within a policy to stipulate when it needs to occur. If we needed to move it to a month ahead or a month later, then we would have to come back and look at the policy in order to do so. So I'll give a few minutes. Either Dr. Shelton, Mr. Schwartz may want to, comment on just pointing out what some of those revisions were that were made to the policy.
Yeah, I can just comment. It was really productive meeting with the facilities director and JR. How do you say his last name?
Bless you. Guyami.
Guyami, okay. And Kevin DiPaolo. And, I think when we get to the AR, we can talk about some of the recommendations they made, but this is really to bring us in line with some of the resolutions and work that the Board of Commissioners has done with our community. And so as, as one of the largest public entities in Haverford, this policy brings us closer to what the township is basically recommending. So I'll just stop there.
And I would add that while that has nice alignment, that though this is a new policy, I would say from the experience I've had with the district that environmental sustainability has been a component of consideration looking at upgraded systems, replacing lighting, the move to propane vehicles. So I think it's also just more of a codification of some of the practices and values that have been in place, and having this policy will help ensure that that lens on decision-making regarding the stewardship of the district resources continues beyond this administration and the leaders in our facility department and transportation department who have enabled some of this work to already be underway and grounding the information that we see, particularly in the ARs, about, commitments that the district can make.
I think it does, however, point out, it does bring up some very solid goals, some very solid benchmarks. It also makes environmental sustainability and stewardship an integral part of everything. It's not, and also we're doing environmental stewardship as part of this building. We're incorporating that into the building. So I think it brings a bit more front and center. In the AR, I like the fact that we're designating, certain degrees of, that the buildings should be in different areas. Very detailed, love seeing that. Includes something here for alternative energy, which I think has to be an integral part of every building project that we do. Down to, green cleaning. I think this is very, very well put together. And, I do appreciate the effort that was put into this. So, I have no major comments, actually, frankly, after reading through this and after reading through the ARs. I might make one, I guess I had a question, more of a clarifying statement. For the alternative energy, one thing that was kind of brought up was that any school and facilities that include significant alterations or replacement of HVAC or electric systems, I don't know if because I've read over this and I when I first saw it, I was like, this is, I get that. I wonder if we need to define significant. What is a significant alteration to an HVAC or electrical system? Just for example, if we're doing a new roof for a building, we're not doing a major alteration to electric or HVAC systems, yet we're putting on a new roof. We should probably look into solar, look into, some kind of an array. So the more I think about that, because when I first read it, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, well, maybe we should kind of discuss that a bit more. Could we maybe add something like that? Or some kind of that includes significant alteration of HVAC or that present an opportunity. I kind of want to tweak that slightly, just so where there's an opportunity to add something, we do it.
I wonder if that belongs there or somewhere else, maybe even in the general provision, looking for opportunities as they arise, something like that, because that section is really about alternative energy, which is why I think it's talking about HVAC and electric systems. And if solar is a good example that fits into that, but it's not limited to solar, you know what I mean? So
that's true.
sort of thinking about opportunities as they present themselves to be considered.
So maybe put that, because I'm just thinking also, if we redo even a parking lot, where we're putting up, putting up a couple poles to panel. I'd be putting it somewhere else. Would it go, are you saying put it in the general provisions?
Either general provisions or maybe somewhere towards the end, just as a
Catch-all?
yeah, like a catch-all almost, these, because a lot of it is really specific about what the district is doing and is planning on doing. And so maybe we want to add another section at the end to say, the actions taken by the district aren't limited to the above. And this policy would envision the district reviewing opportunities for, various activities that would, help the environmental sustainability or however we want to phrase it, beyond these as opportunities arise.
Should we have any kind of I'm trying to think of how we can put that. Because I was putting it for the building that I was putting anything more than $1 million, which we could obviously change later on. I'm I'm trying to think if there's a way, because we say it like that, then I mean, we are looking for everything, we should look for everything, but I wonder if we should put something in there very specific so that if we, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of the way, I mean, I do like the idea, though, putting catch-all in there. I mean, we don't, I mean, obviously, if we're replacing a door, I'm not gonna, you know, we're not gonna worry about it, but if we're replacing number of windows, if we're replacing, you know, I mean, I'm just trying to think of, something like that. If we could try to add something similar to that at the end, I could take a crack at it if you would like. I don't think it'll be a major change, just maybe a quick change to the AR. The policy itself, by the way, just back up slightly, I'm sorry. I think this is probably, I mean, I think it's good. I mean, if we want to advance that to the next level and bring it to the board as a whole, I think it's well-written.
So I actually have a question about the policy, particularly under general guidelines number 6. And so Dr. Rushi, I know you explained that the rationale behind not having a designated date was to not sort of lock us in. But I'm also wondering about if that update would potentially call for additional resources or a change in a budget item. Might it be important to have a designated time frame to ensure that whatever resources would be needed could be included in that next year's budget?
I'm wondering if we could couple it with like the beginning of the school year. Like I know that JR comes to our facilities meeting around September, August, or, you know, to give us the update about everything he's done over the summer, you know, and like these are all the summer projects we've done and all the updates we've done, and could do something like that.
I like that idea.
Yeah, because like I think that couples with, and like this is this is what we envision in the future, and then, you know, these are the different sustainability options that we have in the future that we could, and then, you know, I know Tony says that the budget is ongoing all the time, and so that would give us, the board and Tony, I think, adequate time to, by, you know, when we see the first budget in early the next calendar year, then we would be able to know, you know, what they need, and if we needed to go out for bid for anything or anything like that, hopefully we'd have time to do that.
We can certainly place that anywhere that you would like. We can certainly place that anywhere that you would like. I believe, and fortunately, you know, Dave and Chris, please correct me if my recollection is not accurate. But the wording of the item is to provide a yearly update on the progress that has been made. So it's not so much looking at like, these are our capital projects and we're, you know, moving forward, that we're looking to move forward with down the road. So I just offer that as, I think that's why it came up. If this is a progress report and we say that it has to be part of a budget presentation, what if we wanted to put it in earlier or highlight things where.
So another thought is, if we are embracing this idea of environmental sustainability as a district, is leaving space for that, for presentations both by facilities, but even presentations when it's brought to you by curriculum, teachers and staff. Like, if we're fully going to embrace this, there should be room for it everywhere. And so, but when we're leaving it open without having a place to hold us accountable or for us just to remember, that's when I have concern. And so how can we fully show that we embrace this and we're doing it as evidenced by not just when there's a change or a need?
As I say, if you want to put a time in there, we can certainly put a time in there, but I'm also thinking, like, we have a requirement to provide the board with a safety report.
Right.
And that doesn't say provide it in June or provide it as, but we've got that on our list of, you know, things that are required to be reported. I would imagine that these are, like, not imagine, every time we talk about the next year's budget, a part of it is, you know, facilities. JR's usually here in February talking about what the future facility projects So I guess it's hard for me to think that it's not going to be part of it, or that it would be because it's here. And that's what I'm struggling with, just.
I mean, I guess the question is for the subcommittee, the necessity of a specific yearly update, or like, I really like LaTanya's idea that's, you know, this should kind of be everywhere. And so maybe it's something more like the board expects periodic updates throughout the year, but at least once a year. Like, if we don't want to provide a specific date, you know, because I think like what you're saying, Dr. Rucci, is like this is kind of all over the place, and so it's tough to nail down to one specific time. And I thought LaTanya's point was really good, is that like this should not just exist in one place at one time, you know, and we should be getting periodic updates.
Yeah.
And then, but then put that in there, like at least once a year, so that holds us accountable to like no more than 12 months can go by without an update.
I like that. I think that's a good balance.
I think
Yeah.
so.
I would add that, not that it needs to be in the policy, but a broader goal would be communicating progress publicly. And I think we've talked about a place on the website and things like that. So the idea that it is more embedded in the district's day-to-day operations, planning, thinking, and has a kind of a place where community can also hold the district accountable to these, is another opportunity just to see that this work is being kept track of and embedded. One question I had about the policies we went through, it looked like there's an effort to, and I think this is part of our policy work in general, is to try to be conscientious of defined terms and how we do that. There are, looks like there was a couple places where maybe terms of art were used and were reduced, but then in number 3, indoor and outdoor air quality management remains a capitalized or a defined term. And I wondered if that could go to the more general reference to air quality management practices, since it isn't a defined term.
Yep, we can.
Also, one more question, just in general. I know that, I believe we discussed it at one of the subcommittee meetings, I forget now, but we were talking about doing a sustainability study at some point and using that to try to define some benchmarks. I don't know if we need to mention that in an AR, but I don't know if we are planning on doing one, it might make sense to say, to point to that document, assuming that we are going to do one at some point. That could be something that we add later on, but I just want to lose sight of that, because while I do want to, while I think the policy is very well put together, I also want to get somebody who, knows more than we do, more or less about, about certain concrete steps that we can take.
And weren't we going, as we wrap this up, we were going to mention tonight to this committee about the possibility of looking at a resolution similar to what other districts have adopted, like in addition to a policy, that some have a resolution, and maybe there's a home for that in that particular piece.
That's fine, yeah,
Because again, there are lots of plans that the district engages in, yet it's not they're not stipulated in policy.
okay, that's fine.
No, that's one of the things that was mentioned in the meetings with the subcommittee, was what is appropriate in a policy, what is appropriate in AR, and what we might want to consider in the future.
I just want to lose track of, I just want to lose track of that. And if it's going to be, I believe you're looking at a resolution, so that might be a better place for discussion, but okay. I want to make sure that was just, put out there. So, okay. Other than that, though, yeah, I say after the tweak that Tanya suggested, I think that we can.
In the AR, there were 2 points I just wanted to check and make sure we're being careful about the language and the intent. The second line of the purpose is all aspects of SDHC operations will utilize the principle of using the least amount of energy possible. And I mean, the least amount of energy possible is like turning off all the lights and turning everything, right? Like, I think that could be, practical or, put
Yeah.
some.
I'm sorry.
In the
Bridget, where?
AR,
Okay.
the second line in purpose ends with least amount of energy possible, and I caution that we don't want to be held to that standard. And then I was curious in the purchasing at the very end, appreciate Energy Star standards and a preference for materials that have been locally produced. And it says within 500 miles. Is there a way that that can easily be tracked or known? It's one thing to look and say, oh, this was manufactured in Mexico or China or something, and knowing that that means it's far away, but I'm not sure that we would have the ability to know what's within 500 miles. So again, that's just kind of the practical implication of that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
I'm not
I
sure
think,
where that
yeah,
came from.
maybe while Dave and Chris are recollecting the meeting, I think if you look there, there's some things like as possible, will be, the next sentence even goes on to conclude, will be a consideration, the final sentence that whenever possible, I believe it was, that's really, that's our intent, but there may be times when we can't get that information, or there may be times where, because of the bidding process that we are required to adhere to, this would not take precedent, it would not eliminate that. Tony, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I think we struck, this may fall in the category where we were trying, a number of times we did notice that it would be imposing an undue burden to, try to, in terms of procurement, to try to, satisfy. So we tried to avoid language like that, and I can see maybe that as possible. Does that give us enough wiggle room to?
It says all attempts will be made too. And so I think that one, unlike the first line that Bridget pointed out, which I agree should be changed to practical from the purpose. This one, I think, does have some good qualifiers for the district already, that they're, and that's really what it is. Like, we will attempt to buy these materials that are locally sourced, as much as locally supplied, as much as possible. So that one I'm less concerned about than the first one.
First, okay.
I don't want to make it too, I don't want to make it too flimsy.
Yeah.
Because then it kind of loses all of its
Right.
meaning. So,
Like, this should be the first attempt, and if it's not, if you really can't do it, it's not really possible, then.
I mean, frankly, I would like to see almost some kind of a indication of an attempt almost, like, here was the bid for this product produced in Reading versus here's a product that was produced in, Tijuana or something, and then here are the prices, and yes, an attempt was made,
Are
but we
we
just couldn't do
allowed to
it.
do that?
But
I don't know if we can
we're
do that.
required to go with the lowest
I was going to say, would
bidder,
you have to
doesn't
put some kind
matter.
of disclaimer that says, providing it provides with state and federal?
Yeah, of course, yeah. In accordance with all state and local regulations, I mean, something along those lines, but yeah, I mean, we should have some kind of otherwise we can say, oh yeah, we tried.
Right.
Well, I think it'll be a case-by-case basis too, right? Because if we are going out to bid, then we do have the lowest responsible bidder requirement. But even if it's not, going out to bid and it's just something else, then that's like a case-by-case basis. So
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I think this provides enough as it is, and it's not too flimsy, but it's also not like, holding down the.
No, I'm with you on this one. I tend to agree.
And just a comment, I think we discussed the last time this came before policy e-waste, so we've added a section on that in the AR, and Dave, added a paragraph on the new construction piece. And then, JR had input on some of the precision and specification of temperatures and things.
Yeah.
So, and then I think Kevin provided some feedback on the transportation turnover and things like that, and how dates, if we, I don't think we specify timelines. That might be something that we bring as a resolution, as an like 2050, so just wanted to point out a few other major changes. I think that's it, yeah.
Dave, on the alternative energy section in the AR, the piece that you raised about significant, do you want to take a stab at that, or do you want
Yes,
us?
that, sure. Sure. Yeah, I mean, you want me to rewrite just that section, or do you want me to include like the catch-all that we discussed, or both?
I think it could be moved to the general provisions section, since general provisions sort of.
Yeah.
At least I see them as overarching, referring to everything else that's within there.
Okay.
But, I mean, we can take a look at doing something around that and send that out to people.
Yeah, well, look, maybe, and maybe, as Enterprise said, this is one part of the general, and we have another part in there, every effort for all projects, something, something that would like,
Yep.
maybe even
Looking
do
for
like a
those
EG.
opportunities.
Yeah.
All right, we'll do that.
So I have that revision, the revision to paragraph 6 in the policy, and a couple wording choices here and there. I guess, do folks want to bring this to the board with those revisions put in? I think
the policy can be
yeah,
brought there,
I
certainly,
think
yeah.
it would be great to bring it for a first read. And then that way we don't have to wait another 2 months to see another draft.
Right.
So hopefully district can make those revisions, and then we can review those, and the rest of the board can review the policy for a first read, probably not next week, but at the second May meeting.
Yeah, it is impressive to see the scope of what a sustainability environmental policy touches. The AR really does a good job, and I thank you for even adding other content areas to round it out, but it is a pretty comprehensive set of goals and practices for the district to work into all aspects of our operations. So this will be exciting to have documented, and appreciate that, like I said before, it comes with the input and buy-in of the folks who are already leading our facilities and transportation departments, and reflects efforts that they have gotten started already.
Yeah, just thank JR and Kevin and the other folks that were involved from the district. It's good. We had a good conversation.
We will be sure to pass that along. Okay.
So the next policy on our agenda is policy 626, federal fiscal compliance. And should this one be looked at in conjunction with 626.1, or should they be considered separate?
Sorry. From my perspective, I think we can look at them all together. And Dr. Rushi and I just spoke briefly before we got started tonight. I know there are several attachments linked to 626. From a stylistic perspective, you could certainly just make a continuous set of ARs if you wanted to do it that way too. But the 626.1 was a standalone based off of model PSBA language.
Um,
626 is not new.
Right.
But
This is an existing.
626.1 is.
Okay. So it actually looks like we adopted 626 in June 2021. So it's pretty recently updated for my fellow board members to know that. It's not one of the ones from the 90s.
Yes, and as such, kind of some modest cleanup.
And I can speak to that. The reason it is being brought before you at this point is based on some reflection and recommendations, I think from an audit review. So in consultation with Mr. Testa's office, there was a recommendation that one of the attachments in particular is brand new. Attachment E is brand new, the grant recipient monitoring. And then there are some new additions to attachment D, the cost obligations and property management.
Okay, right, because there are very few revisions and mostly, grammar, capitalization, things like that, to the actual policy itself. So the meat of the revision for 626 is going to be in these attachments.
That's right.
And can you describe where these attachments originate? Are those from federal programs already, or?
Yeah, so they're also largely based off of PSBA model language. There is some minor customization just to allow for flexibility as far as who the delegation of responsibility to or the point person might be, depending on what the specific issue is. But generally speaking, it's derived from the PSBA model and then in conjunction with like federal recipient requirements.
So please correct me if I misunderstood. It is or it is not possible to have these attachments just be an AR? Must they be attachments?
It could be whatever the committee's pleasure is. They could just be continuous AR numbers throughout. I think you actually had them as attachments previously too, in your current version.
They are.
But
I would ask if the board could consider having them as part of an AR. And my reasoning being, our community is becoming more and more accustomed to looking, for an AR. The AR is visually, it appears on the menu of policies, so you can see that there's a policy and underneath it that there's an AR. All of these as attachments, and if they live inside the policy, no one will not, and I know these don't pertain as much to the public, but you don't know, just for a practice purpose, you don't know something is there if it's attached to the policy, whereas if it's part of the AR, then it visually appears on our menu.
I totally agree with that. And I also think another reason to change these into ARs is, just we're updating this policy because of the attachments, right? Whereas
Yeah.
those really are functioning more as administrative regulations. And so, and I didn't realize that there was another attachment looking at this earlier. So, I think that makes good sense, and that gives the district the flexibility to change practices as, either law changes or otherwise as the district has new best practices. And just like Dr. Rush was saying, for transparency reasons, being able to easily see it.
Just trying to go through this right now. It's kind of bulky trying to click on every one. They have downloading it to open it. It's just, I tend to agree. Putting it all in one AR would be, and I assume they'd just be in the A through, can't find it now, the A through F order and then, yeah, because it's after all these like legal stuff and no one's going to scroll it down that far. I find it hard.
Also, like in A, it's the 2024 procurement threshold, right? So I would expect 2025, there would be a different one, right? Like those are the things that are best suited to an AR and not need a policy committee consideration.
Okay.
Latanya, did you have another thought?
No, I was just saying that the reason why I wanted to ask that question, because when I originally looked at this policy, I missed the attachments.
Right, yeah.
And I'm used to looking at these.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I certainly didn't notice that there was a new one.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Right, that
So-
doesn't jump out at you.
Yes.
The one thing on the policy, there is a line, and there was an edit about a records management plan, so that part was changed, but the district shall develop and maintain a records retention schedule, which feels like that could specifically have a reference to our recently created policy, which goes into that in detail.
We can certainly add that, so a reference to policy 800, or policy in AR 800.
How would the AR, it would be 626.1 AR, .2 AR? Just kind of curious.
It would be 626 AR. I mean, we could just have them all in one, or we could have them AR
Okay.
A, ARB, or what are you thinking? One. Just one, right. I would think just one. Is that okay?
Or you could just not move the 626.1 forward as a policy and move it forward as an AR instead, and then just make it continuous.
Yeah, but, because that's what I was trying to stay away from, because I don't want a 626 AR1 when that's very confusing when we're having a policy 626.1. It's too much. So Justin, are you saying that maybe we could move forward the 626.1 as
As an AR as well, and
as
then
an AR
they're all
too?
just AR, because it's really, it's more application than it is.
Does it fit under federal fiscal compliance?
Yes, because
Okay, 'cause
it's
it's
travel
federal
reimbursement
programs.
specifically in the context of federal programs.
I think that makes sense then too, to just have them all be ARs and just one. With a lot of section.
Right, so one question I did have on 626.1, which is about travel reimbursement. So this was proposed as a policy, and then there are places that reference something which must be another document that I didn't know if that would ever take the form of an AR. For example, establishing daily rate caps or the mileage basis for reimbursement, the rate approved by, are those dollar amounts or allowances something that would be expected to be in an AR, or are those like an HR policy manual? I wasn't quite sure what the language and what this would be is proposed as a policy at the moment, but like what those are referring to if it's not an AR.
Justin, if I'm correct, we would have to establish, it's in the employee reimbursement policy, isn't there like a 3.0?
Yes, so Mr. Testa and I have also been going back and forth. You'll probably see that in June, a reimbursement policy due to the recommendation after the monitoring and the feedback. That's why this one came forward right now. And then, so there's going to be another kind of, I'll say a broader, applicable to all employees, not just in a federal programs context, reimbursement policy. The only thing with some of the federal rates, though, they do, just kind of like your bid thresholds change annually. So you may not want to speak to a specific number, and it may just be the concept that's going to change each year.
Right, yeah, I guess I was just trying to figure out the scaffolding of this and what part the board, like if it's board policy, it's one thing, if it's an AR, if it's another, if it's not even in the AR, it exists somewhere else, just to have some clarity on that. And then if it does sound like it might be a later developed policy, and if then it just ought to be incorporated by reference to be updated, this one seems like it might be well suited to also be an AR if it has those kinds of regular update.
And what I would foresee happening is once we move the reimbursement policy forward, there's probably going to be cross-reference between the two.
So the action is to, 626.1 will be an AR, and the attachments will be, they'll all be conflated to one AR?
And then there's gonna be those minimal revisions.
Do you want to do one AR, or do you want to do subpart ARs and maintain the titles? Because if we do a single AR, it's probably going to be like 25 pages. It's going to be like 25 pages, yeah.
But we could have 5 or 6 ARs
like
for
a
one
a dash one or a
policy.
point, whatever you want to do, dash one, dash two, point one, point two. And then there would be 6 of them, including the travel reimbursement for federal programs.
Including what is currently now identified as 626.1.
Which was
That'll be an AR.
And that was going to be a new policy anyway,
Yes.
so that wouldn't be, yeah, a big deal. Well, let's see how that looks as all separate ones. And then if it's unwieldy, we can see if it's better.
How to parcel
Yeah.
it out.
Because that one, we'll move the policy forward, breaking it out as ARs, and that's easy to change in the future if we find that it's better as multiple or one.
Okay. Want that to come back here?
I don't think it needs to come back. I
So
think
we could
can
look
move
at it for the May 16th meeting.
Yeah, because there really weren't substantive changes, so, I mean, I know there's a couple in 626, but,
Yeah, but it's just sort of reorganizing a lot that's there.
yeah, so I think we should move that one forward. And, so moving on to policy 605, tax levy. I did have in my notes so 605 and 606 were both discussed at the last meeting, and I did have in my notes that we were considering combining them. So just want to hear about the changes that we do see here and whether there was a decision not to combine them.
So from my perspective, I think there were a couple additions that the business office requested that we make under the general guidelines in 606. And those pertained to the acceptable forms of payment. So it would really be the last two.
Sorry, I'm not following. What do you mean?
So the last 2 bullets under the guideline section.
The district will
six-
not accept cash payment for
Oh,
payment
606.
through that one?
Yes,
606.
yes, I'm sorry. So that one, and then actually, I'm sorry, it's just that section.
I think our markup that we're seeing in board docs reflects all of the
Everything.
changes, not just the ones since our
Oh.
last committee meeting, so it
Okay.
makes it a little more
I'm sorry.
confusing.
I'm sorry. And then as far as the potential combination, I think that's still on the table, and that's my mistake then, if the directive was to actually do that in the interim.
Is the proposal to combine the two? Sorry, following.
Yeah, but that was from the last committee meeting. I have in my notes that we had discussed that they were similar policies and we're wondering if they should be combined for consistency and just, ease of just having fewer policies. I guess because 605, the purpose is to collect taxes, and then 606 is about who collects the taxes. So I don't know if that's is that an important distinction that we want them separate, or do we want to try and combine these?
Could it be combined into tax levy and collection?
Right.
When I read it, I guess, and, I don't know what the legal ramifications are, but, I mean, tax levy that's our remit as a board, whereas tax collection is more operational, but it read fine as 2 separate ones, but I guess.
I think it almost makes sense because the delegation of responsibility, the authority for the tax levy is, part of that is who can collect taxes. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I also noticed the guidelines are on tax collection. Tax levy is just kind of in telling saying that, you know, the board can tax. I totally think that we should do tax levy and collection. Get it all under one. People are gonna, it's hard enough to search through policies. I think that combining them to make it simpler always makes sense.
I think for me, it would be helpful if I could actually see what that looks like. And so, I don't know if that's possible at like the next, will we see that? Will we bring it to the full board and see the change there, or keep it here? Or, I'm having a hard time imagining the layout of it.
Yeah.
One thing I'm noticing is that for the tax levy, there's no guidelines. So I mean, which makes sense, actually, I guess makes sense. So maybe it would just be, almost slides right in there, to be honest with you.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I tend to, but no, I think it makes a lot of sense to see what it looks like.
I would say if we're looking at to see what it looks like, it would make more sense to have it come back here, if that's okay with, you know, with the board, because it's different, you know, usually if we're combining something, then we do bring it back when we've combined them and not moved a newly combined policies forward for first reading without the committee looking at it.
I think that makes sense, because looking at the authority, it would just need to be worded in a way that combines the two authorities, if that's a route that we want to go. So that will take some reworking and discussion.
And then the other question from last time, which I don't see here, was whether we should include a provision in 606, or if it's combined, it'll just be both 605, about getting bounce checks. And, I don't know if there was just a choice made to not do that. But that was the other question from last time.
Sorry, just to go back to whether we might combine the policies or not, I'm trying to think, like, in terms of the vast work of updating the policy manual, if it would be more expedient if the tax collection policy as it stands doesn't need much work. Maybe it is better for us to kind of take the path of least resistance here, instead of investing more time and resources when we clearly have many more policies to continue to go through.
I was leaning that direction
Yeah.
too, that since we aren't looking at, since the content of either policy hasn't really generated a debate around, you know, what they contain, it might be more effort than it's worth to combine them.
Yeah, I think that we brought it back so that we could look at it together, and so since it hasn't happened, it's, you know, it is what it is. But there doesn't seem to be substantive changes between 605 or 606 between the last committee meeting and this one, so we could just move forward as two separate ones, for Christian's point, which is a good one, which is to just keep moving forward.
But Antoinette, to your point about the question that was raised regarding a return check,
Yeah.
I do think we should have some language in there. And like maybe even if I'm looking at the guidelines, that sentence that says the tax collector cannot accept any payments after this date, even perhaps after that sentence, like,
Yeah, like, well, what happens if I gave it to you before, but then it bounced?
right, it's
Yeah.
after that date. So I think we have to be clear about that.
And I think that we had a discussion last time about how quickly the checks are cashed, which my understanding is that it is very quickly. And so it wouldn't be like, well, I had the money in my account when I gave you this check 2 weeks ago, but then you didn't cash it until today, and now I don't have the money in my account, so that's your fault. That's not a scenario that happens.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, I do think just adding in one sentence about Tony, like, is there a general practice about what, if a check bounces and it was provided to you before the deadline, but bounced after, or?
So even if it bounces after, since it hasn't cleared,
Yeah.
the funds were not available, then they would incur the NSF fee.
Okay, so yeah, I think
We
that
can
that's
write that in.
important, we should put that in, yeah. That should really just be a line, I don't know if that should stop us from moving forward the policy.
Right. This is just a little, like reading it, it strikes me as funny the way it's worded. The purpose of the policy, and this is 606, is to establish who may collect taxes on behalf of the district. I feel like it would just be more clear to say what to establish the requirements for the tax collector. It just reads to me like, who can collect taxes? I don't know.
Me, not you, yeah.
Just be a little more specific that this policy is about a tax collector and their actual requirements and responsibilities.
So the second to the last paragraph under the guidelines where it talks about payment. So the first sentence is very clear. The district will not accept cash payment for payment due. I don't know. I mean, I understand what the paragraph is saying. It just feels awkward, or you have to reread it, or is that clear to community members, like what form of payment is accepted? I guess I'm really looking at that further after January 1st of each year. The only acceptable form of payment should be money order or certified check. What would draw someone's attention to knowing that after January 1st? Like, they just read that first line and think, okay, I'm good. Something to make them keep reading the full paragraph is what I'm trying to get to.
Okay.
Yeah, what if it was reordered to say acceptable forms of payment prior to January 1st are personal business checks, money orders, certified check. After January 1st, only money orders or certified
Yeah.
check.
I like that.
I think we should specify that it's the school year, because it's weird to think about before and after January 1st. Or maybe not, because that's when you get your bill.
Your
That's
bill
just
like in July and
Yeah,
then,
right. Okay, that's fine.
And January 1st, because then taxes are leaned in February, so it's kind of like after that point, we really need to make sure that those funds are available if the
Yeah.
taxpayer is going to pay them.
Would you like us to also note that the taxes are leaned at that point? Just so it's all in one place?
Yeah, might as well throw that in there. Seems important.
Just clarification on that point. So when you say leaned after January 1st, that means, what does that mean, actually?
So then any taxes that are unpaid as of the date that they're leaned, they go to the county for collection. So then the property owner is assessed a penalty and fee. And
Okay.
any payment at that point is then made to the county. So we
Right,
would no
got it.
longer accept payments. And then on a monthly basis, the county sends us any taxes that have been collected that were delinquent.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Certainly an important distinction then.
Yes.
Yeah.
so yeah, the paragraph before talks about a designated annual date and tax collector can't accept payments after this date. But are you saying that date is January 1st, which is used about the types of payments that we use, or they are not related?
As far as the lien date,
Yes.
I think the lien date is the middle of February. So-
Okay. So the January 1st is the form of payment we would accept that is not related to the lien date, which is not specified here. Is that because it changes?
We can put that, what the county has as the official lien date, just
Yeah.
to make it stand out.
Mm-hmm.
Add that note.
And then that way they know none of these payment methods are acceptable for us, because at that point they're then with the county.
Yeah.
Guess it might make sense to put that, excuse me, the the paragraph on the county lien should maybe go after just a minor suggestion.
First sequential, like first January 1st happens and then mid-February.
Exactly.
Yeah. So all uncollected real estate taxes, that paragraph's gonna move to the bottom. Or at least those two paragraphs are gonna switch places.
That's what I was looking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So after the lien date, all taxes must be collected by the appointed delinquent tax collector, and that's the county. Is that always the county? Should we specifically say that, or could that change?
You could always go with another collector.
Okay.
But if you do that, the county still is owed their 5% commission, even if you go with another collector. And they've been very clear about that for districts who have gone outside of
Understood.
the county's collection process.
And so I recognize that taxpayers will receive these documentations in the mail, but I'm also wondering if they're looking to the policy to know what to do. How would they know who the appointed delinquent tax collector is?
So I guess we
And is that
probably,
our responsibility to inform them of that, or we, at that point, it's up to the delinquent tax collector to tell them?
for us, because we use the county, if someone were to come here, say on March 1st with a check, we would direct them to the county
Okay.
office.
Okay.
So yeah, maybe.
We could also add a link to the county office in the guidelines, or
I don't know, we should do that in the policy though, because what if
It changes.
the next day the
Broken
link?
Extremely bad.
Yeah, right.
Talk about it again.
I guess just for my own clarification, like where does our duty to inform stop, is what
Yeah.
I'm getting at.
Right, so like what communication goes out to them when they're late? Like, does it say it on that?
They would get a letter from the county. So
Okay.
they'll do a distribution, once they get the file
Okay,
out to the taxpayer.
Okay,
So they'll know that it's the county of Delaware that they're gonna make their payment to.
okay.
As opposed to Keystone Collections or somebody.
But I think, yeah, I think what you're trying to envision is a step where somebody realizes that they missed paying their taxes and they go first maybe to our policy to figure out what to do. It sounds like if somebody shows up at the Oakmont Administration Building in the business office, somebody there could help direct them to what their options and next steps and responsibilities are. But that first, like if they look at the policy, like we anticipate if somebody's looking about what do I do to report an absence, or how do I know how the curriculum, right? Like people turn to the policy for all kinds of things. So I think that's
Does it make more sense, though, to have that information on the district website? I mean, honestly, I don't know how many people go directly to policy. I think they're searching the website, or making phone calls. Sorry.
I guess on the flip side, I'm also thinking about for the person that may be frustrated with being behind, and they would say, why didn't you tell me that I have to? And so again, I'm coming back to where's our responsibility to inform? And I want to just make sure that we are doing what we're supposed to do.
Is that captured in the, I know we're going to review, or maybe review the, was it the taxpayer?
Bill of Rights.
Bill of Rights.
that's one still coming up, right?
I don't recall any language in there, but,
That's 621.
That's a
It would
new,
be
yeah,
new.
it's a new policy.
Yeah,
so it,
we could put some,
Oh, that's a good place.
yeah, it
Show us up.
says, administrative judicial procedures for taxpayer, and that's to appeal, enforcement procedures. I just don't remember if that spelled out that process, but maybe it doesn't.
I don't know that it did, to my recollection, it didn't really cover typical
Okay.
collection. It was more appeals about
Right,
the basis
okay.
of the tax.
And to Dr. King, to answer your question, particularly with regard to real estate taxes, which is what the majority of this is referencing, generally speaking, the burden is on the taxpayer that once the notice is issued, they're obligated to pay.
Okay.
There are certain carve-out exceptions. For example, if somebody takes ownership of the property and in a time period where a notice is issued and they don't necessarily receive it, there is recourse for them, but there's certain time limitations on that. So generally speaking, the rule is that once the notice is generated and there's proof that it was mailed out, that the requirement is they have to pay.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
I have us adding, the statement about what happens when a check does not clear. And, the addition of the noticing the difference between before January 1st, in addition to the sentence that says after January 1st. And then also adding the February is when taxes are liened, and if there's a specific date, is the date recurring every year, or is it decided?
For the lien taxes?
Yeah.
I'll verify, but I think it's like a fixed date each
If it's a
year.
fixed date, we should put it in.
Okay.
If it's not, then, we might want to just say something like, at which point later it will be referred to, or, you know, something like that. And then, we want to switch those two paragraphs, the second to last paragraph with the paragraph before that. So those are not nothing, but maybe, do we think we can just move it to a first read? Yeah, okay, let's do that.
16.
6:06, yeah. Yeah, right, for May 16th, yes. Not next week, Trish. Yeah. Then the next policy on our agenda is policy 607, tuition income. Had a lot of strikeouts here.
It does, yet when you take a look at the tuition, the language regarding waiving tuition for seniors, at the conclusion of that, it's identified in green, but that language does exist, with the exception of the one sentence, board is adopting this policy in the best interest, blah, 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 that particular piece. But the other language there that starts, you know, the school district of Haverford Township will waive tuition charges for senior class students when parents or guardians of these students have registered. In practice, in concert with the way that language is, it does exist. That's not a new practice for us.
There was a community member that had a question. I remember looking at the current policy and seeing that.
Yes.
I just had one, in that waiving tuition for seniors, the third paragraph, I was a little confused by why the third paragraph seemed lost.
I agree that seems like it is maybe more generally applied.
Yeah, maybe went somewhere else initially, but the one that says tuition income.
Yeah, shall promptly be deposited.
That's under the waiving tuition, so.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know if it needs to be moved up.
Yeah,
maybe
we can move that somewhere else.
for guidelines or.
Yeah.
For the statement, the assessment of tuition to non-resident students of the district who expect to establish residency within the district within 90 calendar days shall be calculated, collected. So is that saying that somebody who says, oh, I'm going to be moving into the district in May, they can start to attend and we charge them tuition until they formally establish residency, but not more than 90 days beforehand? So then I imagine that links up with the enrollment and registration policies that we have. Okay, and then for waiving tuition for seniors, I wondered if we, like, seniors maybe designates also a older resident of our community, and so that could be confusing if it's a 12th grader. I didn't know then if for those students that we educate up to the age of 22, like, is it just their terminal year in the district that would apply for, if we just needed to be more, if we needed to specify 12th graders or?
In their final.
I think so, if, like, where it reads that senior class students, I think it's not the senior citizens.
Right,
Senior-
it wasn't, yeah.
I think the question's a good one, which, well, yeah, what about our students who stay with us until they're 21? When are they a senior? And would this apply to their last year, or?
Technically, they're a senior in the year that they participate in graduation,
Okay.
but then they stay, you know,
Right,
because
but then they
for some
stay.
students, they choose
Could we
what
put?
year.
Yeah, right. So then when would this policy apply to them? Just that year?
That could be different, yeah, for them.
Yeah.
Because it also is going to depend on their IEP. But
Mm-hmm.
if they move out, it would be, if they're already planning it and participating, they've indicated that they're going to participate in the activities around graduation.
We could put something like the year in which graduation is anticipated. What about
Let me
that?
take that back because they can change.
They could change their minds, yeah.
Like super seniors.
I mean, but
Yeah.
you're always looking at it from one perspective, which is, this is an expectation, so I guess it really doesn't change it much if you're saying the senior year or the year they're expected to participate in graduation. It would still be the student's
would be
final
at the-
year in the district, whatever that is.
Right, right, at that point, it would be your final year in the district. We're not gonna say, they're not gonna say, well, now I've decided not to graduate. It's like, well,
Well, they
at the
can-
point where you no longer lived in the district, you decided not to, you decided to graduate, you can't change that decision, something like that. And then at that point, if, when they're 19 or 20 or whatever, like, they would be in a different district.
Different district.
I don't know.
You should look at some wording around it.
Yeah, I do think it's a distinction without a difference, though.
You think so?
Because you're probably in the same, if you're talking about a regular, so special education student up to 22, there's finality with an age out. But if it's a student who's in a regular education setting and for whatever reason, they don't graduate in June, I mean,
That's okay, that we get though. I think it's the question, as I understand it, is specifically for the children who are with us until they're 22.
until the 20, well, then
What year is their senior year?
yeah.
And isn't it
So we
that
might
the
want to define
regulations
that in here.
go by birthday now, not by
Right, even,
school year?
right, it could be October.
So,
yeah,
yeah,
they
yeah,
do.
right, and
Yeah.
that was a different, that wasn't our rule.
They
that
can
was a
stay
different-
with us.
Right.
For the,
Right,
Right, but what about a student who's retained and doesn't have an IEP?
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Because then it's, conceivably, how long could that go on?
retained
But-
in.
well,
their
could we
senior-
say, but
the
for
way
no
that's-
more than 1 year? Like, what if we said that?
That-
Like, the year in which they were anticipated to graduate and in no circumstance for more than 1 year?
Then you-
Something like that,
Place
through the
finality.
end of the school year.
Bookends
So
it,
it's
yeah.
like, you just say, well, either way, you've moved out of the district at this point, this is when you anticipated to graduate, so we'll give you the grace through the end of the year. But either way, by the end of this school year, you're gonna go into the district in your new location.
And I think that's a concept that's also missing from this sentence, that we will waive tuition charges when parents or guardians of these students have registered for the school year and wish to continue enrollment through to graduation time, but it doesn't specify that.
You can say like, but in no circumstance longer than 1 school year.
I agree with that, but then what's the circumstance? It doesn't say about you've moved out of district.
Yeah.
And then I want to make sure I understand. So you're saying for no more than 1 year, but just the current year or an additional school year?
For the
The current year that I'm in?
right, through the end of the current school year.
Okay, so it's, okay.
Is it
So-
worth considering aligning it to tax collection? So if the family paid their taxes for the school year, or the calendar year, or the fiscal year, I guess if maybe, I need to understand a little bit more the rationale behind this. I understand we don't want to be disruptive to a student who's about to graduate, but where did this waiver come from? Is this a practice
This
across
was
the
all,
state?
this
Is
was,
just
this has been
something
in
we
our
do?
policy.
Okay. And I guess the way I'm thinking of it at this moment is if a family paid their school taxes for the year, the student's going to graduate by the end of the school year. I don't know. I feel like they've covered
Well,
their,
how does that work? Do they get their money back or does it go? Like, what is that?
When you settle.
move,
Do they get a
That's part of your
refund for?
settlement.
That's part of your
Right.
settlement, right? I think it becomes, so it sort of, it stays with the house, and that becomes part of your settlement. So it's not like they pay it and then they, right?
And payment of real estate taxes is not payment of tuition. Those are
Right.
two totally
Right.
different concepts.
The only thing I was going to say is what about the scenario where someone is renting?
Right, they rent,
So
and then
that's
the property's still
The
there.
difficulty with making that a,
And I think the focus of this policy, or this section of the policy, excuse me, is related to not disrupting the school year.
Yeah,
That's
right.
what our major concern and focus should be. So how do we stay focused on that path? I think is important for us to consider in this moment.
So I think what, to Bridget's point, putting something in here like Haverford, the school district of Haverford Township will waive tuition charges for senior class students who move out of the district during their senior year, when parents or guardians of these students have registered for the school year and wish to continue the enrollment through to graduation time, but in no circumstance will it go beyond
Beyond the year.
the current school year. Something like that,
Yeah.
right? And so, because it's like, to your point, you have to put in the qualifier of like, we're not just like, people don't regularly pay tuition, we're not just waiving it for seniors for no reason, we're waiving it because they moved, or don't live here anymore, and then we're saying, but in that circumstance, you get this current calendar year and not something later, or not calendar year, school year.
Right. And I think, to qualify, you have to have been a district resident for the full prior school year.
Yes,
That-
right, they keep that, that's the next sentence.
Maybe something after senior class students, so senior class students or students in their, I don't know if we use the term terminal academic year per their IEP, or something to that effect.
And I know that we use graduation time and we all know what that means, but there's like graduation date, like I feel like that should be defined, like graduation time, certain seniors say that starts in October.
Day of graduation. So like, yeah, day of graduation.
Yeah, I wanted to be specific, because I mean, senioritis starts early.
Are there
Graduation
scenarios,
time.
are there scenarios, though, where a student may miss the graduation date because they need to do some sort of credit recovery over the summer and then graduate?
I guess they wouldn't be
Don't
eligible then for
participate
that
in graduation.
Okay.
graduation.
They may get they'll get a diploma.
But would they still be eligible for that credit recovery that will push them over the finish line? Through the district, so. Because it, like, the intention, right, is to see this, let the students see their academic career through here.
I think that's where you get it, so that it's through the end of the school year. Is
No.
extended school year considered the
say
school
not,
year?
and not,
It's
not
not.
including
No.
it,
Not?
not including
Okay.
a period of extended school year. Not including.
Are there other
Let me
districts
take a
we can
look at that,
to?
because I'd like to talk with Nicole Battistelli. This is not, I've been here 9 years, we've utilized this once. So I can't speak to, we've had these different scenarios, and this is how we've worked through
Yeah.
them. And I believe you don't want language that is so restrictive, but you want some guardrails on there. So I'd like to have a conversation with Nicole about some of this.
Yeah, and,
Because we've also had students who have finished up in the summer. So, whereas if we say the close of that academic year, they're into the next year completing their work, and then,
And wouldn't have been eligible for a Haverford diploma. And
until
not
that
have-
time. Yeah, until they complete their work.
Right, until they complete their work, but if we would cut it off at graduation date and they
Yeah.
needed something over summer, yeah, that could be.
I don't think that's the intent, and I wouldn't want to create language that would then be interpreted that way.
Right.
Like, we wouldn't do that right now.
Right.
But if there's language that goes in like that,
Can we just say will not extend into the following school year?
it will not extend to the following school year, something like that.
Right, continue the enrollment through to the student's graduation Right, so it's not graduation time per the district calendar when everyone goes and puts their caps and gowns on, but it's when that student graduates, and then not to exceed that time frame that we set.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it with Nicole.
Okay, so we'll bring this one back.
I think, yes, if
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah,
One other just language in the last line, it says, parents or guardians must assume any additional charges that are incurred by the district's decision to waive tuition charges. And I feel like the district's decision in there kind of muddles that or makes it seem like here we have a policy, but then maybe there's still a decision that could turn out differently. Like, it just
say
seems
by
It's
this
additional
waiver.
charges
Yeah.
though, right?
I
Yeah.
think we just get rid of that concept.
say incurred
By
by
the
this waiver
districts,
of
yeah.
tuition charges. Or such waiver of tuition charges, something like that.
Yep.
Just take out the actor.
Wait, just to be clear though, this is talking about additional charges, not the general.
They assume
tuition
additional charge. I think the focus should stay on
It says
that.
transportation or lodging. So, for example, if the family lived out of town and needed to pay for transportation to and from the district to get their child here, or they needed to pay to live like,
They have
and
to
then they
pay
tried
for
to
it.
charge us for that.
Right.
Yes.
We usually provide bus service to our students, but not in this case.
Not in this
Right.
circumstance.
Yes. Okay, so we'll see that one again in June.
Yeah, sorry, just one other question. So, yeah, going back to district's decision. So is there like paperwork that goes along with this process? What does the process look like? It's saying it's a decision, but the policy's there, but I'm assuming that there is a process, right?
Yeah, they'll start with their registrar's office, that Nicole will get involved with it. They have to, produce that they have moved out. Usually it begins with a residency matter.
So is there an AR that accompanies this, or is that something that?
No,
If not,
it's
we
a procedure. It's a
Sure,
procedure.
okay.
But maybe putting a reference to qualify,
Right, because I
like they
wouldn't
have
want
to
to.
apply for it, right?
Yeah, I
Like
wouldn't want a family to think, oh, we moved away, it's senior year, and then, problems happen because it wasn't
Right.
communicated.
Maybe to put in something about, to qualify, you have to have been a district resident and apply to the district registrar or something like that, or,
No, really, it's, a parent will come in, and what they would do is, in this case, we were residents for the entire school year last year, so they're providing that information. We have, or we are moving out, and school district, that my child is a senior. Here it is, it's,
Yeah, to Bridget's point, I'm just wondering if somewhere in there's like, it needs to be communicated to the district, like, period. Or just some statement to that effect. It's not an automatic thing.
so maybe it is one of the references to our policy on residency.
It could, you could do that.
I
You
mean,
could,
that's where
you could also require an affidavit if you wanted to.
maybe,
if-
maybe when we put the clarifier in, we'll waive tuition for senior class students when parents or guardians submit to the registrar that they have moved out of a district but want to register their child through to graduation, right? Like, to just kind of put it in that kind of presenting the situation to the registrar.
Yeah, since it's coming back to committee, I think it will be helpful for me to get some additional input from the people who actually deal with
Yeah.
matters such as this.
Anything else on this one before we move on?
And the tuition, so we spoke a lot about the waiver. The tuition that this outlines is for people who are moving into the district within 90 days. does that capture all of the tuition rates that we charge? Or all the tuition circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any others.
Okay.
Last call.
Yeah.
Okay, we're moving on to policy 608, which is a current policy with some revisions in it. The first time that the committee is looking at these revisions, and it is bank accounts. So, Justin or Tony, can you just let us know the impetus for these revisions here? They seem minor.
It seemed like there's some language changes maybe.
I had a question since the first time I looked at this. Designated depository, those are people that you specify, Mr. Testa?
Yeah, so.
Okay.
Usually, excuse me, what'll happen is we'll put a list together of the banks that we utilize, and that'll come to the board just to approve that for the upcoming fiscal year. So TD Bank and
Right.
other banks we utilize.
Okay, and then you would designate people who have access or can deposit?
Yes.
That's what's referred to by the designated depository? Okay.
Maybe that should be a defined term in the policy.
About who would have access.
Oh, no, they're just the designated depository.
Okay.
Basically a bank, right?
Now, there'd be a person who is authorized to,
Well, so it says the board shall designate one or more banks or bank and trust companies as depository. Was that what we're referring to? So is that enough of a definition, or do we need something else?
I guess then,
Address.
to be consistent with then, like, the guidelines, if we understand what a designated depository is, that would be bolded or, like a defined term used throughout.
We could even just have like a parenthetical there that says designated, like referred to as designated depository, and then
In the
exactly right,
authority, yeah.
capitalize it, and then use it like that throughout. So it's just like a,
yeah, I guess I was confused because under the second guideline, it says each designated depository shall be advised not to cash checks. So it sounds like a person.
Oh, no, it's
a
the
person at
bank.
the bank.
So the bank isn't permitted to cash a check made out to the school district.
I see.
It needs to
Okay,
be
got it.
deposited.
Okay,
It's like a fraud prevention practice.
all right, thank you. I have dyslexia or something.
No, but yeah,
no,
like
it's
when if we were thinking of it as a person, it reads that way, yeah.
Right.
One question I had, I see the last line is new language, which seems to mirror exactly the one before about the board. So is it the board obtaining quotes for banking services or the business manager obtain quotes for banking services? And what distinction are we trying to make by adding the last line?
I would say it would be the business manager.
So then we could strike the one about the board shall obtain the quotes?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we just didn't have the strike through.
I have a question about the purpose. So the purpose of this policy is to memorialize. Is that?
That's not language you usually say, right?
It can, the purpose of, we could just, go ahead.
I was going to say specify, maybe, is to specify the manner.
I think we could just strike it and say the purpose of this policy is to designate who will oversee bank accounts in accordance with, designate how bank accounts will be overseen in accordance with applicable state law and regulation. Something like that.
Is to,
It's very clear.
is to,
Is to designate.
I gave it a shot.
Yeah, I just think no, but our policies just read without that sort of actor in
Formality
there.
in it,
Right, the formality. It's just like, we have this policy so that we can designate and oversee bank accounts. All policies are here to memorialize, right? And I think like that's where it's, yeah. So
Make
we'll
it
just
more
take
cleanly.
out the superfluous language there.
Yeah.
Usually I'm just looking at some other purpose statements. The philosophy of the board considers, blah, blah, blah.
This one is a pretty tactical
Dry.
kind of, right, like, we need to have bank accounts. There isn't
Oh, no,
so
there's
much
no
of
philosophy
a
here.
philosophy
No,
or
I'm
value
just pulling
statement.
other
The
examples
philosophy
if
of
we're going for
having
consistency.
money. Yes,
To
right.
keep it in a secure location.
Yes. Anything else for this one? So we're gonna define designated depository after that definition that already exists within the authority, and then we'll bold it and capitalize it when it's used throughout. And then we're gonna remove the memorialized phrasing from the purpose. Any other revisions for this one?
And get rid of the line that says the board shall periodically obtain quotes. It's being replaced by the business
Prior to
manager.
going.
Right, right. So the second to last paragraph here is stricken because it's being replaced.
Okay, and for the purpose, we're looking at the district shall designate and oversee bank accounts in accordance with applicable state law and regulation. Done, right?
What was that one?
Just cut everything from the purpose up to the word in which. And start at the district shall.
Oh, yeah,
Board.
that works. The
Order
district
the
shall designate
district.
and oversee bank, yes. Just remove, yeah, from the purpose to in which the. Okay, and we're striking
Are we
that.
saying the board or the district? Because the authority goes to the board in the next one.
What is the board does that because that's what you have to vote on.
And there's a code reference there too.
Okay. Do we think with those were, I think those are pretty specific
Yeah.
revisions. I think we can
I
bring
think
it.
we can.
Yeah, okay. So we'll try and bring that one. Send that to the board. Okay. And so now we're coming up on the one that was previewed earlier. Policy 621, local taxpayer bill of rights with 621 administrative regulation. This would be a new policy for the board.
And I think this was to satisfy some legislation, if I understood it.
Justin?
Yes, so there is a requirement that you put your community on notice, through, it's the local tax, it's literally the local taxpayer bill of rights, legislation. And so this is, again, this is a model, or modeled after, the PSBA version. Tried to simplify it as much as possible. You can't necessarily, but there is a policy and then an AR, which kind of speaks to the implementation.
I had one comment on the AR. I don't know if we want to,
Did anyone have a comment on the policy before we switch to the AR?
This might be a comment on the policy because then I found it in the AR. So it only applies to non-real estate taxes, which here it says per capita occupation, occupation assessment, occupation privilege, income, net profit, business gross receipts, privilege, amusements or admission, and any other tax. So I would say, like, I looked at this and was like, okay, well, those are ones that School District of Haverford Township does not employ those host of other non-real estate taxes. But then when you look at the proposed AR, it talks about the number one is applicability, eligibility of taxes. And it says disclosure statement does not apply to real estate taxes. The applicable eligible tax levied by the district is the transfer tax. So it does sound like there is one that applies, and it's the transfer tax, which I'm like, is that not a real estate tax? It's the transfer of real estate. And I think if this whole policy, the thing that it's most likely to cover is the transfer tax, I think it would be helpful to put that in the definition and not have to like eliminate it through other things.
in the definition of the policy?
In the
within
definition of
that text?
eligible taxes.
Okay.
Says it's a whole host of things that are eligible, none of which currently apply here in Haverford Township, but then the AR says the one thing that does apply is transfer taxes. So I think that should be called out as the eligible thing or added in there so that part is more clear.
Sorry, just so I'm clear, so a transfer tax is not considered a real estate, it's non-real estate?
I don't know, that was a surprise to me, but that's how
Okay.
it's defined in the AR.
Sure.
So when I read as all non-real estate taxes, I didn't assume that that carved out transfer taxes.
Yeah, it's distinct because there's a distinction between the annual real estate assessment tax and then the real estate transfer tax.
Okay. So I think it would just help to clarify that transfer taxes are an eligible tax. And that will largely be the nexus of this taxpayer bill of rights and any action or concern that is raised by a taxpayer in our township.
Okay. So we're gonna add that to the definition of eligible taxes. Anything else on the policy? Okay. Chris, you had some questions on the AR?
I just had a minor comment on the Section 3 tax overpayment refunds. I thought that should read a taxpayer who is overpaid an eligible tax. So I think that's all it applies to. It just says who's paid an eligible tax, so.
Everybody gets them.
Oh, it was overpaid, yeah.
So I was reading through it and. You get a
Was it, we could say who is overpaid an eligible tax?
I think it should read that way, maybe I'm wrong, who's overpaid, because I think it only applies to an overpayment.
Justin, do you see that?
I do.
Should it be in the next paragraph as well?
Yes.
Taxpayer overpays a tax as a result of receiving a notice of underpayment?
No, well, if you pay, so
We've just pulled it open.
if you pay the face value of a tax despite receiving a notice of underpayment, of underpayment, you would technically be overpaying. So, does that make sense?
No? Sorry.
No idea what's happening.
Can you say it
Doesn't
again?
need to be then.
It doesn't need to be in the second
Doesn't need to be in
paragraph.
the second one.
Great.
The first one,
First one it does.
First one it does.
okay.
So we're just changing the first sentence.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments on the AR or the policy? I think those are,
Okay, I have one small question, sorry.
sure,
So, still in that same paragraph,
in the AR.
in the AR, 3 tax overpayment refunds, the sentence that says, if no return is required, the request must be made within 3 years. Am I misunderstanding? What are you requesting if no return is required? Did I miss a part?
What is the return?
So I think a return would apply to situations
Overpay.
where, oh, I was thinking it was the type of tax, like if it's an income-based tax, you would have a return related to
Yeah.
that.
So what does it mean here?
So I think it's like a process thing, like if you have to submit a return, it's due related to when you filed the return. If it's not a tax for which, like a transfer tax doesn't have a return, then it is related to the payment due date, right?
Okay.
It's just trying to establish
Oh, okay.
some marker of when the clock starts ticking.
Got it. So could we maybe make that a second paragraph?
Yeah,
It's just really confusing when it follows that, the prior sentence.
it is. I agree. Just add a return there, or, oh, God. Make it a new paragraph. Starting at if no return will be a new paragraph.
Going back to the policy, the guideline, the first sentence of guidelines says information obtained by the district as a result of an audit, return, report, investigation, hearing, or verification shall be confidential. I know this is about taxes and things like that, but I think it would be helpful to say information obtained, I guess, about a taxpayer, or, to put some context to it, because there are lots of audits, investigations, reports, things that are under the district's purview, but like to try to specify what this policy is applying to for these guidelines.
Would an alternative be just, because it ends with verification shall be confidential, and then just to the extent required by law? Because
I was just thinking we should try to qualify what audit, return, report, investigation, hearing mean, when those are concepts that are applicable in lots of the district's work, but like here, just to try to steer it back to, this has something to do with taxes or taxpayers, not other audits or investigations or things, reports that the district may generate.
And so that's why I was saying, if we say to the extent required by law, there may be other, I think in a report or investigation is probably a good example of that, where maybe that a certain report or investigation is not necessarily confidential. I don't know if that, it's just, I think we're saying the same thing, President Wiedemann. I don't know if that.
I guess, when I first read it, it seemed very broad, and then I had to be like, oh, wait, this must have something to do with inquiries that are made regarding a tax, like a taxpayer is appealing or asking for relief or a waiver or something, but that's not necessarily clear by that first sentence, but I guess in the broader context of the policy, it does make sense. I mean, that's what you would infer.
Or did you want to try to qualify at the beginning and say personal and or private?
Right, I think in one, it says about taxpayers' books or records, if that's generally what is, like, kind of putting more of that concept to qualify or specify what kind of information this policy is covering. Just a suggestion, if it doesn't fit or resonate.
Yeah, I think we could, I understand the objective. I think we could take a look at trying, it might go back to one of your kind of crafting a definition of what would potentially fall under that. I don't know if that would make it clearer.
Such as, but I'm saying, suggesting such as in here, not to present it as this is an exhaustive list of.
Right, I think there needs to be some flexibility with it too.
Right. I mean, I think, yeah, the policy talks about this local taxpayer bill of rights, which just, if that's all the context that we have about eligible taxes and that, then it goes into audits and investigations and hearings, that kind of comes out of, like, that's new context for what is in this policy. And so kind of giving it some more specification or relating it to the purpose of this. Is like, I think it just, that part kind of jumped out at me as like, well, how does this fit in when we're talking about a Bill of Rights? And then all of a sudden we're talking about the confidentiality of reports and investigations.
So I'm actually looking at subchapter C. And I have no legal training, so maybe that's not the best thing. But this is in chapter 84. There's a reference to it. I guess what I'm wondering is like, how much leeway do we actually have? Because it looks like this is all written out. There are definitions here. There's a list of what qualifies, what doesn't. Like, how much do we even want to deviate from the language, since this is a state requirement that we're posting this? Or I guess whatever
That's
we're,
an
I know it's an AR, but
acceptable
like.
reason for the
yeah.
language to be the way that it is, yeah.
Yeah. Just want to caution how much we're.
And to Dr. Larson's point, the definition or the explanation under confidentiality of tax information in the statute is any information gained by a local taxing authority as a result of, and then all these examples that we have cited in this version of this section of the guidelines.
Or maybe there's more
Maybe-
specificity that can be drawn from this and then pulled into.
Maybe just starting it with tax information, because that is the heading confidentiality of tax information is that section of the reference there. Instead of just saying information generated, but tax information.
We could say any tax
be-
information.
Yeah.
So it mimics it identically, and it is more specific that way.
Right. I think that, yeah, just that qualification, that it's not just any audit, any report, anything that the district does, but here we're talking about the tax information. I think that ties it together better.
Yes. Okay, so some good discussion, but I feel like not that many changes in
Right.
621. We're gonna put over payment, and we're gonna make that new paragraph. And we're gonna add the transfer tax to the definition of eligible taxes. I think that's it. So I think we can bring this one forward as well for a first read in front of the board. I see there's an information item. We also have public comment. It's 8:17. Do we want to save these remaining two policies for next time? I'm not sure how much of a discussion we can have in like 3 or 4 minutes. So,
Did one of the
timing.
GASB one, is there much that we would be discussing on that one?
Bridget thinks we can get it done in 3 minutes.
I was just curious, it just seemed like it was pretty,
The one about capital assets and GASB statement.
GASB, like, yeah, where is that coming from?
Familiar
Are
with
we
this?
going to have much input on?
None.
Great, let's move it forward. Any other
We can just
questions?
move through that one pretty quickly.
I did just have one question, sorry, Jen. But do we have an asset inventory system?
We do not have a system.
We don't have one currently, so that.
Right
okay.
now, what the auditors keep is on a spreadsheet, so it's just an ongoing database. of
Okay,
information.
so this policy would require the creation of an asset inventory system.
I don't know if it requires a system. I know it requires parameters. Right now, we don't have parameters, and this sets that up where it's $5,000 for the individual unit or $10,000 for the group purchase. So it would set that stage.
Okay, I was just curious.
And so this is language recommended by our auditor?
I think, was this from PSP?
It's a PSBA model, but it's crafted,
With them in mind, I guess.
and the GASB 34 is this very long convoluted set of
It seems similar
procedures, yeah.
to me in the way in which there were policies recommended by our bond council to better comport with best practices
Similar
there.
to that.
This would be something that there are experts in accounting and things who are recommending it that we probably would be wise to take their good counsel
When
on
it's coming
this.
from the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, it's kind of, here's something new for us to follow.
Okay. So, a last minute addition.
Yep.
Move that one forward too. Okay. Now I'll turn it back to Dr. Rushi for the information items.
So the information item identifies the policies that are going to appear on an upcoming agenda to be repealed. And those policies are repealed because they are the policies that were combined over the last few meetings as we have worked. Once policies are combined, those that existed as singletons, then we'll just list on the agenda, we'll note for the board and the public that the reason they're being repealed is that the contents of those policies have, now become part of another policy through that combination.
Great. Okay. So that brings us to the final section of our agenda, which is for public comment. Is there anyone in the public who would like to
No.
speak? Seeing none.
Meeting a school requirement tonight.
Were you in a government class? No, no, not even a government class, okay.
You were a trooper.
You're right.
You just like a good policy. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I did have a question, what is AR?
Oh, it's a good question. It's administrative regulation. So it's basically, we have our policies, which are the official policies of the board, that we have a very special procedure that we're required to go through. So we talk about it here in the committee, and then it goes in front of the full board at one of our general board meetings. We read it once as a general board, and we accept the first reading. We read it another time as a full board, we accept the second reading, and then it goes before a vote to adopt it. The ARs, or administrative regulations, are not that rigid, and they're really just to help the district understand what the board meant when we were implementing that policy, the different kinds of things that would go into the actual day-to-day implementing the policy. Because we here on the board don't work in the schools, we don't work in the buildings every day, we're just setting policy, and it's up to the district to put the policies into place, and that's what the administrative regulations do.
Policies of what, and the ARs of how.
Wow, what a better explanation in such fewer words. Who's the lawyer here? Go to Dave for all of your questions for policy.
So with that, the business of this committee is complete and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.